Okay, welcome to part two of the colonialism lecture on early American literature. We have that time frame again is about 1607 to 1750. This is part two of two, so this is the last PowerPoint of this topic. Now, as you recall, we were learning about Puritans, and so now we're going to move on to the types of literature that Puritans would read and the types of literature that they would write, and that, of course, is what interests us most in this class. Now, as you can imagine, with what we learned about Puritans in the first PowerPoint, the kinds of literature that Puritans are more interested in it's going to be plain, just very much like the style of dress, their home styles, and everything else. And it's going to be practical. It has to serve a purpose. And the two purposes that Puritans found for literature were to provide a person with facts, such as what kind of crops to grow where, or how to read, or how to figure out a math problem. Or they had to be devotional. They had to be related to God in some way. There had to be some kind of religious element to it. And definitely, almost all of their literature had to be aimed at some kind of personal growth, personal satisfaction, personal salvation, and the condition of a person's soul. Literature was seen as a way to serve God and a way to serve the community. Again, plain, practical, very fact-filled or devotional. The first book that was printed by the Puritans was called the Bay Psalm Book. You may have heard of it. It was printed in 1640 by a man named Stephen Day. And as you know, the Psalms are basically, they are in a huge book in the Bible called the Psalms, if you're familiar with the Christian Bible. And basically they were songs. They were supposedly verse, written to praise God. And it became the first book published in North America that was preceded only on a press by one sheet of paper that was called Oath of a Free Man and by an almanac. Otherwise, it was pretty much the first book, full book, published in North America. The first edition created 1,700 copies, and eventually it was so popular that Puritans in England and Scotland also made use of the Bay Psalm Book. It was used for over 100 years, in fact, in churches all through New England. It was very popular, but today there's only 10 copies currently existing. So if you own one, it's worth quite a lot of money, and certainly makes sense to have one of them at Harvard College Library. A little excerpt from Bay Psalm Book, or the rationale behind it. The Bay Psalm Book itself is an example, a really great example of Puritan literature that condones that direct translation of the Hebrew Bible without any attempt to make the verses poetic in an English manner. And if you know anything about the King James Bible, it is a very poetic translation. And as we know, the Puritans are plain and practical, not ornate and flowery and poetic. So they were quite educated. Many of the Puritans were high scholars and could read Hebrew, could read Greek, could read Latin. And when they translated the Bible, they didn't add the extra rhyming and verse that is apparent in the King James Version. And this is the rationale. They said, if therefore the verses are not always so smooth as some may desire or expect, let them consider that God's altar needs not our polishings. And that really speaks to that whole plain lifestyle. Exodus 20, for we have respected rather a plain translation than to smooth our verses with the sweetness of any paraphrase. And 4, have attended conscience rather than elegance, fidelity rather than poetry, in translating the Hebrew words into English language and David's words into English meter. So they really were opposed of making the verses sound poetic. They just wanted just the facts. All right, we're moving on now. We're going to leave the Puritans for a while, and we're going to go back in time to the Jamestown settlers in the southern colonies. Now, certainly in your AP history class or your American history class, you are going to learn much, much more about both the Puritan and the Pilgrim settlements and also the Jamestown colonies. We're just going to touch on them for you so that we have a better understanding of the literature that was written during that time. You may or may not know that the Jamestown settlers landed in 1607. And that they, unlike the Puritans and unlike the Pilgrims, had very strong ties with the Church of England and with the English government. And there was a big reason for that. The English government and the Church of England were backing them with a lot of money. Because what is really the only reason to colonize? That's to make money, to exploit, in many respects, the riches of another place, and to expand your empire in the process. And that's definitely what the purpose of the Jamestown settlers were in the southern colonies. Um, because it was such an agrarian, such an agricultural area, what happened was a lot of plantations cropped up, a lot of farmland, and it created distant communities. Now, very much like or unlike, excuse me, the Puritans, these southern colonists were quite outgoing with their friends and their family, and when they would get together, they would have friends, they would have get-togethers and parties and dances, which of course you couldn't do if you were in Puritan society. And you can also see from this picture that they maintained the European, the British lifestyle, the ornate dress and the decorations and things like that. So the types of people who colonized the southern plantations and colonies were plantation owners, but also there were smaller farms, and there were slaves, and there were servants. So there was quite a bit more of a social hierarchy and social disparity in the southern colonies than there were in the northern colonies at that time. Also, the southern colonists were considered to be more worldly and more witty. I mean, they would tell a bawdy joke, or they would put on a play, or they would sing a naughty song, and they just loved life and didn't really have trouble dancing and gambling and all of those kinds of things that were certainly prohibited for the Puritans. Well, we're going to talk now. We've sort of explored the two main groups of settlers in the early colonial history. We're going to look at the kinds of literature that they wrote during that time, and you can probably guess already what kind of literature the Puritans would have written. But one main form of writing, and this was true both for the Puritans and the southern colonists, were journals and diaries, and just basically a record. And we look back on those today. Still, we can find a lot of, I guess you'd say, anecdotal information, but certainly we take some of it as fact. We look at those journals and those diaries, and we are able to get a really cool picture, personally speaking, in many respects, what life was like back during the early colonial time period. Travel logs were also quite important, and a Plymouth plantation is what we would kind of consider a travel log. We're going to look at that in the next few days. And basically that was a necessity, because they were colonizing a brand new land, and they needed to record what they saw. They needed to record the vegetation and the climates and the natives who were here and all of those people. And they had to record that for people who were going to come after them. Letters back home was really a very important type of writing during this time, and boats, once the colonization started to kind of pick up speed, there were boats going back and forth, dropping off colonists and supplies, and then going back to England and delivering letters to loved ones at home. And we also look back at these letters. Many families kept them in their family history, in their family stores for years and years, and you can go back in time today and still look at many of the letters. In fact, the internet is a great source for looking at some of those very authentic first letters that were written back and forth. And what did the literature of the time discuss? Well, we certainly talked about it being devotional for the Puritans, but it also discussed, as we said, the exploration of the new land, new experiences that these people were having, and sharing that really with their loved ones back home so that they could get a taste of what was going on. All right, we just need to look a little bit at the writers of the time. I want you to be familiar with some of these. You want to make sure that you know who they are. John Smith wrote a book called The General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles. And so he really kind of wrapped all of the settlers into one there. William Byrd was very definitely more of a southern colonist, very connected with the British church, or the British government at the time. William Bradford wrote of Plymouth Plantation, about some of those first days as colonists, and we're going to be looking at that piece of literature. We're also going to be looking at Anne Bradstreet, who was a Puritan, and she was a woman, and she wrote the very first literature that was published from the colonists. And what's interesting is she wrote poetry. You might think, well, didn't you say Puritans could only write fact information, or they could write devotional information? Well, Anne Bradstreet kind of got around that. First of all, she never planned for any of her things to be published, and second of all, everything she wrote was very devoted to God. It was a very religious-based, religious-centered, and she gives us a great taste of what the Puritan, just the normal, everyday Susie Puritan's kind of life was like. Jonathan Edwards, who was kind of a little bit after the Puritan time period, but definitely encompasses the mentality, the hellfire and brimstone. You know, you're nothing in God's eyes, and you know, he could drop you into the pit any minute. You're just alive by his grace kind of thing. Um, published a sermon entitled Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, and you can probably just imagine what the text of that is, and if you're interested, you certainly can look up excerpts of that. And this is just basically a list of some of the sites where I found the clip art that I didn't get off of PowerPoint. So thanks for joining us. Make sure you take care of the activities that you're supposed to do for this PowerPoint. We'll see you in class.